So I suppose a bit about me really. I'm a PhD scientist. I worked as a postdoc at the University of Nottingham and I was an RA2A for 5 years. And what that meant was I was in a very lucky position that my academic got me PVC and disappeared off and left me with 7 PhD students, all this lecturing. I have to say only one of the PhD students spoke English as a first language, so it was a pretty steep learning curve for me. He also was the person who invented genetically modified tomatoes, which were grown in this country and bought by the public really well until everything unfortunately fell to bits because of labelling issues from American products, when the British public decided that if they weren't going to have the choice, they definitely weren't going to buy transgenic tomatoes. Luckily at that point I was headhunted by a company called Mars. Some of you will know about the Mars bar and Twix, but they also do pedigree, whiskers, horse food, all that kind of thing. So I was lucky to go and join a large corporate, really getting science into product. And then obviously things changed and I moved to Leicester, where I was really lucky to spend 7 years working as the head of research, development and commercialisation within the life sciences, and that's where I met Carl and James joined our team. And I've now been at Charnwood campus for 2 years. But why am I really talking to you? I think that's the important bit. So what I'm really, really passionate about is getting science into product. And the difficulties it can throw up when you're going from a bench into a product, whether that might be a medical product, it might be a life sciences product, it might be a transgenic tomato. When I was in Mars, and in fact actually I was thrown in the deep end when my boss got made PVC and was at the University of Nottingham, suddenly I had this huge group to look after. I had no clue how to manage a very diverse workforce, and actually that was a very steep learning curve. And I was really lucky, I had some very good mentors there, so hopefully it wasn't too bad and people didn't really mind working in the team. But when I joined Mars, large American corporate, they were very, very keen on making sure you had the tools to develop both an engaged team, but also an engaged team that met their corporate ethos. This was before sort of CSR even really, but it was all about the vision and the values of that company. And I was lucky to be able to travel the globe, being a trainer for engagement, as well as running a research team delivering science into product. That's great, but suddenly when you become a sort of wife and mother, it's maybe not the best job in the world. It's great if you like living in hotels with really nice sheets and not have to cook dinner, but knowing when you get home, all hell will break loose because the child's not seeing you for weeks. And that's probably one of the reasons where I had to think about my career and what was important for me, and I joined the university. And one of the other reasons I was really lucky to work for Mars is I'm an animal lover and I do collect things that are in a good home. So at the moment we have a total menagerie from ducks, lizards, cats, dogs, horses. That's helped me, having my external kind of interest has helped my career, I think, as well. I think that's something that's really important now to the younger generation. So when I joined Charnwood campus, and then even before that, I think I had a bit of an inkling of how to help companies develop. But what I was tasked with when I joined here was to really kind of understand what were the pinch points that companies were experiencing. And obviously there's lots of data out there, but a really good source is the work that the Scale Up Institute does. And I don't know if you've come across the Scale Up Institute. Google them. Definitely worth reading. Funded by the government, but seem to have some good views that definitely are of value. So they survey businesses in every region. So this is Leicester specific data that was published at the start of the year. I mean, you can see the spelling mistakes and everything there, so that just tells you sometimes. But anyway, what the barriers that were really hurting companies in the local region were access to UK markets and international markets, finance, you know, these are kind of obvious things, but a real lack of funding and support for innovation and R&D. And they did want to have more access to growth hubs and labs. So that's really interesting. And you think about what we just talked about with the funding for the LLSA now coming to an end, and I have to say every other ERDF programme in the region, and there was, I think in the East Midlands, 69 different funded programmes, some aimed at life sciences, some at general business support. So there's going to be a really big void in the region. And it's across the country, but regions that are not devolved administrations are going to feel the pain worse because they haven't been given that funding pot to use with how they won't. So I think Leicestershire got 1.7 million as part of the Levelling Up funds, and actually before that I think it was closer to nearly 100 million they got from the RDF funding. So it's going to make a real difference into the region. So that really helped us kind of form what we thought we could help and deliver with from Charnwood campus. I'm going to say that Charnwood campus is not associated with the university. We're not in receipt of public funds. We're a start-up science park, growing out of an ex-AstraZeneca site. There was no big pot of money left by Astra when they vacated it. So it's all growing organically from here, and it's been able to help deliver growth for our companies in the region that's sustainable, and I think that's the important piece for us. So based on that data, my knowledge and working within the university, we decided that there were 4 areas we could really help companies with. One is recruitment. Obviously that's a big issue for companies, not just for companies that are coming to the site, but for companies that are growing in the region. We've developed an expert network, mentor network, to try and, because I don't know all, but my God, somebody sitting next to me might be able to, the company that's sitting there. So being able to form a base where companies can come together and network and just learn. And we're the only place in Leicestershire that is life sciences focused. So this is the only place we need to do it. We've also set up our NHS and academia platform. Now it's not going to replace the support through ERDF and the LLSA, but hopefully it'll close a little bit of a gap. And then we run events, networking, workshops, etc. So nurturing a successful and resilient and sustainable business is something that has been a very strong focus through our events. And you know, all these things that all come through, you know, with that kind of activity. However, what we found as we've started to run the events and making sure we brought that thread in, we've come across real experts in the region who have come and delivered training, talks to the companies in the region. And I don't know if any of you have been to any of our events, but what we've been really lucky to have a lady called Rachel Bull, who used to work for the cabinet. She was voted one of the best trainers within her company, but the company is global, so we're actually we're doing pretty well. And she has come and talked about what it is to build a resilient, sustainable team, and I've got a lot of resources from her. And what's, I think, the sort of most important thing that Rachel says, if you've got a company, and you can see this top bold, and that's your amount of employees, you will have one really engaged employee. You'll have a range of people in the middle who are disengaged. They're not doing anything bad, but they come in, do the job, and you know, that's about what they'll do. And then you will have a couple of individuals who will be actively disengaged, who are basically throwing the anchor on the boat and trying to stop that boat moving forward. And there is some figures which I think are quite shocking, which actively disengaged people will cost you about 70% of the salary you're paying them, because they're not actually doing anything. You know, they're actively stopping other people doing their work. Disengaged employees, you're losing about 30% of their salary, and your engaged employees probably, you know, paid about 20 or 30% less than they should really be for the job that they're doing. And then Rachel talks about, you know, it's not all about an organisation has to have heart, and that heart is culture and values. And I think you probably all know this sitting in this room. So that, you know, when you have an actively engaged employee, they're enthusiastic about the company's mission. They really understand what's expected of them when they get into work. And surprisingly, often we are seeing, when I'm sort of talking to companies, that seems to be a big gap of actually, well, we've started this company, we've not thought about our culture, our vision, our mission, our values. So as they grow and recruit more, people aren't actually feeling like they can help push that company forward. Rachel has also offered help to local companies. She did a session, after the last talk she did a session free for each company where she gauged their engagement, and then obviously sort of identified some of the ways forward that might help that company. And after that it becomes a paid offer, because we don't have government funding. We're like everybody, we'd like government funding or some regional funding to do that. But certainly if we come into our workshops, etc., you do then get that additional offer, because everybody in the region is trying to give something back, because we know that we're in that position that there is not much funding available. So one of the things that raises round about that kind of whole understanding your vision and your mission of your company is corporate social responsibility. And I think the smaller the company, often that is another piece that's not looked at. And there's an awful lot of resources out there online to allow you to start to build what does your corporate social responsibility look like. And this is Harvard's top 5. And I must admit, this is recent data, I was quite surprised that Ben & Jerry's, Salesforce, Starbucks were in the top 5 globally, as what they, Harvard Business School obviously, thought were kind of some of the best stuff. But when you actually dig into what they do, you go, oh, actually, that's really very interesting and very commendable. So we kind of brought that kind of theme to one of the events we ran about a year ago. And we were lucky enough at that event to have the LEP lead for sustainability, move to net zero, which obviously plays into your CSR, to come and talk about some of the work that's going on in Leicestershire, and go and have a look at the Net Zero Hub if it's something you're thinking about. There's a lot of resources and help there. Do it quickly before the funding runs out. But we also had a company who are a growing scientific supplies company actually come and mark out what they had done to try and understand their roadmap to net zero and their corporate sustainability that would obviously then feed into their CSR strategy. And this is just one of the slides from Chris when he presented it. And actually they discovered a lot of things that they didn't know about their supply chain. Some of their supply chain had already gone net zero and were amazingly good. Others, it wasn't even on the horizon. So, you know, they're trying to sell into the NHS. Ultimately, NHS long-term plan and sustainability shows that they want all their suppliers to be net zero by 2030. Now, that's getting a bit close, really. So it's really important for small companies when they're starting up to think about where they want that to be. And we had an example from an innovation workshop we ran a couple of weeks ago, and it was a great product. You could see how it would be used, but it wasn't ticking the NHS sustainability box. So they couldn't understand why they couldn't sell it into the NHS. But it wasn't recyclable. It wasn't, it had electronics in it. You couldn't easily split it. And because it had been in the body, it would need to be incinerated, and it had batteries in it. So it ticked every single box that the NHS wasn't even going to look at from a sustainability point of view. If they had thought about the product couple of years earlier and known about where the NHS was going to go, they might have been in a better position, but they're now going to have to redesign it if they're going to sell into the NHS. So there's lots of things to think about when you come to that. And I think Carol will talk even more about some of the regulations that we're not even going to touch on. So we're just going to skip on quickly onto what we do within the Talent and Skills Institute.
And it's something that we've been working with all the universities in the region. We were lucky when we launched this last year that George Freeman came and gave us a quote and everything. It was really good. So this is seen as a kind of groundbreaking collaboration between a science park and universities, which is to make sure that we can deliver for us a graduate pipeline that's ready to work, and for the companies, the graduates that they can get are also then fitting in with their requirements. So very important if you've got a large company relocating to your site and they need to, say, recruit 200 scientists at once. Also really important for companies who then may want to upskill the recruitees or employees they've already got. They can work with some of the cutting edge scientists within the universities to upskill their people. And we're actually now, we're kind of looking a bit more long term on this. So we were talking about Talent and Skills Institute, and we were talking about the STEM pipeline, which is fabulous, but you need to have something feeding into that STEM pipeline. So we've been lucky enough working with the LEP, Careers and Enterprise Hub, to obtain some funding to actually work at that lower end of the pipeline. So we're engaging with our STEM teachers in the region. There's 90 schools in Leicestershire. We are able to offer funding for those teachers to be backfilled to come to our event. And at the event, sort of whole idea is for them to understand that there's a life sciences industry in the region, because obviously still traditionally Leicestershire was seen as kind of hosiery, textiles, tourism, that kind of thing. So the expectation is, if you know, as a parent and you've got a kid who's wanting to do science, more than likely they won't then come back, even once they've done their degree somewhere else, to this region, because there'll be no opportunities for them. So this is really about engaging with the teachers in the region. And I think the clever thing for our companies who are working with us on this is it really helps them build that sustainable pipeline. So there's a lot of smaller companies who will also be involved in that, and there is a value in it. So if you're setting up a company, definitely trying to get involved in some of those early STEM discussions can really help your sustainability for recruitment. So one of the events we ran was we focused really on the recruitment piece, and we were really pushing sort of the whole kind of STEM, early STEM, graduate thing. And what was really interesting, we were really lucky to have a guy called James Taylor from Mackledowie. I don't know if you've come across Mackledowie, come and talk. And wow, actually, fabulous speaker. If you ever get a chance to go and see James speak anywhere, it's fantastic, because he really had some deep insights into the fact that the generation that you may be recruiting now are not like us. We're all of a certain age around this table. And actually, we need to understand what the Gen Z demands are. They're really different. They really care about their health and well-being, the social responsibility of the company, whether they'll get flexible working, what are the perks. You know, so that is some of the things that, again, companies are having to really now consider when they start their recruitment strategy. But honestly, if you ever see James talk anywhere, go and see him. He's fantastic. So then coming back to kind of the things that we've been talking about earlier about the LLSA and what it was set up to do, which was really to drive that collaboration between our world-leading academics in Leicestershire, number 2 in the ref, I have to say, for clinical medicine, which is phenomenal. Being able to fund small projects between academics and companies was so important. So one of the things that we've managed to do is the campus has partnered with University of Leicester's Precision Health Institute, and we have some funding through what was UKRI. It was originally concept funding. It's now called Impact Acceleration, and it's about getting science into product and vice versa. We had a big event last week to kind of launch the start of that, where we'd be able to offer local companies some free grant funding to deliver small projects, which will then ensure that they've got enough data to go for larger funding pots. It's not going to replace the ERDF, but it's something. And unlike the ERDF, it's not just companies in Leicester. We're able to work with national companies. We've partnered with the East Midlands Academic Health Science Network and Medilink to run innovation surgeries. And that's where we've been able to kind of work together, because companies can come have a real deep dive on something that they might be struggling with. So the example was that piece of technology to help in surgery, which hadn't considered the kind of green credentials, and he hadn't thought about that when he came to the surgery. So, you know, it's that sort of whole product design piece we can help with. We're also now looking at regulatory and legal, so we have a legal team that will join these clinics as well. One space left on the 10th of May if anybody in the room knows of somebody who might benefit from it. Not often we have a space left, which is unfortunately a cancellation. So these are just the companies that we've helped so far. Pennine, large medical technologies manufacturer in Derby. Enrich My Care, Medilink winner for a really innovative platform to deliver a method for parents to manage very critically ill children or children with behavioural disorders. iView Health, who's now he's come to us and is now going to be hopefully working with some of the academics to take his project forward. And I think the events like this just help stimulate that whole networking piece, which doesn't generally happen unless you're at national conferences. And I think the one last thing I really wanted to say was, from those events, we've learned quite a few things that I didn't expect. Come on. I think my computer has decided that it preferred the bank holiday. There we go. So we were approached by some of our partner organisations to say, could we run a Women in Biotech event? And we thought, well, that sounds like a bit of a we, seeing as, you know, the team here is female. And actually, it was a real eye-opener for us. We were really lucky with some of the speakers and the panellists. This is actually a picture of Isabel Webb, who's the head of life science strategy now in what was Bays. Can't remember what it's called now. But they're developing their new strategy for the life sciences. And one of the things that was raised was the lack of diversity, just male-female diversity within the biotech field. And actually, you know, it's quite terrifying that we make up 50% of the workforce. We're probably more science graduates than male. And then by the time it gets to kind of board level, down to about 10%, which is an enormous dropout, and it's a real loss of talent. In the LEP area, we know we're doing slightly better, but it's still not great. So it's about, you know, 26% of companies have a female director within the region. So one of the things that we've learned from the work that we've done for the companies, but interacted with the experts on, is that actually there's more we can do. So we're now incorporating women in biotech as a theme running through our events for the next year. And a few other things that we've learned was, although we had a company vision, we didn't shout about it. We didn't say proudly that we want to be a leading next generation science part within the UK. We didn't shout about our values. I've done a whole website redesign since I joined, and these are the things that are now front and centre on our website. And, you know, these are the sustainability values that you see everywhere, but actually they're really impactful and meaningful for us. And we've even talked about who the team are, what we do, and got pictures of ourselves on the website, which is a real step forward from you would have seen the original, very, very clinical, it's a property offer. So we've learned, and it's great to kind of be delivering these kind of supports, but being able to learn yourself. So yeah, that was kind of all I wanted to say. So there's my email. Please feel free to contact me, but questions or thoughts or anything, please.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Lucy?
Come on then.
I was talking about like sort of future aspirations. Really, it's amazing where you are so far. But you know, what does the future look like? Any like really exciting projects around the corner?
Well, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. So the future is to continue to grow the park, and starting as a start-up science park, our strategy has been very clear that to become sustainable, we had to have large companies taking large buildings, because that's what these buildings were originally designed for. It was a single occupancy park, very large buildings, huge R&D company. So on site we've got 3M, Almac, who are the UK's 5th largest pharmaceutical company, and in fact there's a figure that says it's something roundabout of all the drugs that are in development at the moment in clinical trial, Almac have been involved in 60% of those drugs at some point of their development. We have Condiva, who are the largest manufacturing company for inhalers. They're originally 3M. The reason they're here, and there's a massive factory at the end of the road, is that they worked with Glenfield, who are world-leading respiratory scientists, and that's been over the past 20, 30 years. I mean, there's always been, since about 1870, some kind of pharmaceutical industry within Loughborough. The other company we've got on site is Charnwood Molecular. They're a great success, spin out from Loughborough University 20 years ago, and now occupying a really large medicinal chemistry building on site, doing very early stage drug discovery. So in future, we'd love to have an innovation centre. At the moment, it's probably slightly further down the pipeline because we've got to make sure the park's sustainable.
Yeah. And how's your journey to net zero coming along then? Is it on track?
Well, one of the so it's really interesting when you're regenerating an old site. If you think about it, the amount of trapped carbon in these buildings is huge. So actually, it would have probably been easier for a developer to come in and knock them all down and start again. And we haven't done that. So this building that you're sitting in was a lighthouse lab, and we were capable of doing 50,000 samples a week. Obviously then there was no need because we don't have COVID anymore. We had the vaccine, there was no need for that amount of testing. But what we did when we refurbished this building is we changed it from a gas system into air source heat pumps. So that's a massive step forward for buildings that were built in the 80s to be able to make them kind of sustainable.
Nice. Cool.
We won't get it right all the time, but we know we're doing, although we've got grass being cut out here, we're doing no mow May on the rest of the site. So we're doing lots of different things.
Any other questions or comments? I think just one of the themes I'll pull out, Lucy, from your talk. I think even though there's been sort of a level of support that we've been able to give as a programme for the ERDF, and we've got lots of partners, sort of yourselves, the Academic Health Science Networks, Medilink. I think support is very disparate, but we all work collegiately in the background. So actually, if you speak to one person, they'll probably know you know me, and actually if you are looking for support, it's best to just network and sort of get out there at these events, because actually there's not sort of one true path that you need to go along if you are trying to get a sort of a product or a service to market. And actually sometimes you need to take take a couple of steps forward and then one back, and then sort of define, because actually sometimes, unfortunately, the NHS is not always the right market, or you may have to go abroad and then bring back. So there's a lot of thoughts there.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're developing something that looks like it's going to be a Class 2 medical device, you probably better doing it in America to start with, because it's not going to hit an FDA regulation. You've got an income stream, and then you would probably go Europe and then the UK. Does mean in the UK we're less likely to get the new technological advances, but